Hello, everyone. My name is Ned Dennison. I'm a marathon swimmer and organizer from Cork, Ireland. And we've started to record some history of the swimming activities in the area. We've had an absolute explosion of open water swimming, and in particular, an explosion on the marathon scene. So today we have Bernard Lynch and Damien O'Neill, who've been absolutely the two key people with bringing on the whole open water scene at Myrtleville. So, guys, say hello, please.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, everyone. Bernard here.
Um, do us a favor, guys, and explain where Myrtleville is. I'm always curious myself, and where that fits in geographically compared to, say, the Lee Swim in the center of town and Sandy Cove Island.
Okay, well, I'll take that one, Damien. Myrtleville is a little bay, a sandy bay at the mouth of Cork Harbour, just outside Roche's Point. Cork Harbour, as you know, is the second largest natural harbour in the world. It's a rural, quiet country area, and it's somewhere that people have been going to for generations to paddle and to walk and to enjoy the scenery. And I suppose we started the open water swimming there 20 odd years ago and changed the dynamic down there.
And I think actually just in terms of your question there, Ned, if I'm right, Myrtleville is about exactly halfway between where the Lee Swim takes place and Sandy Cove. Not that you'd want to be going to Sandy Cove or anything, but it is halfway. It's about 25 kilometers from the centre of town to Myrtleville. And then if you were going down to swim back from Sandy Cove, then that's about another 24 or 25 kilometers.
Okay. Just a kind of interesting history that I hadn't talked to you guys about is I interviewed some of the early winners of the Lee Swim. And one of the guys had a fascinating thing to say to me. He said, look, he said, open water swimming in the old days, he goes, the River Lee wasn't particularly clean. He said, so I could walk like 20 minutes down the hill, down to the center of town. I could get a bus towards Myrtleville. It would drop me at the top of the hill, and I could walk 20 minutes down. I'd swim for half an hour, which was more than anybody was ever swimming down there. I thought I was absolutely the greatest swimmer in the world. I'd walk back up the hill, get the bus back into town, and walk up the hill to my house. And he said, what you guys don't understand today is you jump in your car, push the gas pedal, and you go down to the beach, you park your car next to the beach, you go for a swim, you're surrounded by people doing crazy swims. He goes, back in the day, he goes, we couldn't get there easily. And when we got there, we were kind of all alone. And we didn't have anybody doing anything even like what we were doing. So, Bernard, you filled me in a couple of years ago on some of the early swims, people like Mick Ahern. Can you just give us an idea of what those people were doing back in the day?
Mick Ahern is a good friend of mine. I got to know Mick about 24, 25 years ago, but would have been familiar with the name. And Mick was a swimmer with Dolphin in his day. Mick is probably now, he's probably, he's late 70s and was a very good swimmer with Dolphin, but one of the original open water swimmers before open water swimming became anything like what it is today. And Mick was a genuine shooting star. He was doing stuff that nobody had done, and he was swimming from Roche's Point to Church Bay across the mouth of the harbour, which we did a few years ago, Ned, and we thought that was a pretty iconic swim, but he had done that 30 years ago or whatever. He had swam from Carrigaline to Crosshaven, and that was again another pretty iconic swim, and was one of the originals, and somebody who I certainly got to know well, and he would have covered for us on a number of swims with his son, who was another very good swimmer. He's actually an international underwater hockey player now, is what he does, David, but a very good open water swimmer. So Mick was doing that, was one of the originals. I mean, if you go back to grab ball, and Damien will tell you a bit about it, but if you go back to grab ball 20, 30 years before. Can you hear me?
Bernard, you disappeared.
Lost you there at Gabel.
So I was talking about Mick Ahern, but I was saying if you go back 20 years before that
I lost Bernard, sorry.
Okay. Are we clear?
I can hear you, Bernard, but Ned doesn't seem to be able to. Ned's mic is now switched off.
Sorry, Bernard, can you hear me?
I can hear you clearly, and I can hear Damien, and Damien can hear
Sorry,
me
I've lost you somehow. Sorry, guys, I don't. Can you hear me now?
clearly.
Yes.
Can you hear me now, guys?
Yes,
Clearly.
we can. Yeah.
Sorry, my apologies. We lost the sound there at some point. Bernard, you were about a third of the way into describing Mick Ahern. He had done the Carrick
Sure.
line to Crosshaven. Could you continue that? Sorry, folks.
So Mick was genuinely a trailblazer and was swimming in the open water when not that many were. But if you go back another 30 years before that, in Myrtleville, Powell Gurham, which is 400 meters from Myrtleville over to the west side, or you go the other side in towards the harbour to Graball. Damien will tell you about photographs and pictures that we would have when Eddie Campion would have been involved in it, and Dolphin and Sunday as well, where there was thousands of people competing in galas and Graball and swims from Powell Gurham to a point and back again. So, and there was a history of it, but then there was a massive gap for probably about a 30-40 year period where there was no sea swimming done at all. And I suppose the difference with the sea swimming in those days, it was maybe 200 meters, 300 meters, a bit of competition and that type of thing. Mick was the one guy who was doing the distance swimming at that time.
And mixed swims were kind of 5K distance.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was
so,
mixed swimming.
Yeah, it's interesting. We had a great history in Cork of open water swimming, and as you say, for all sorts of reasons, some of it to do with pollution, some of it to do with transport. It just kind of fell away. Bernard, I have you. The first recorded time that you appeared on our list was 2008, which was the Black Rock to Cove swim, which is 12K, and then 2009, Cork to Cove, which was 16K. I think you were probably in your wetsuit in the day.
Can you hear me, Ned?
I can hear you. Tell us about
yes.
Tell us about what inspired you. How did you get connected?
Well, I'll tell you a little bit about me and I'll hand you over to Damien then, because I think some of his swims are equally, if not more, inspirational. But my background would have been Sunday's Well Swimming Club in the 70s, and reasonable competitive swimmer. You know, I would have been bronze and swimming away doing the mornings. I had a number of other sports that I was interested in, but open water swimming or sea swimming was something that my father would have brought to us, and right around Kerry, and we would have swam from Roberts Cove out to the Dawn Rock and back as teenagers. And we would have done, I remember my first Lee swim, which was from Glenbrook to Monkstown. And that was, I think I was 11 years of age at the time when I competed in that. There was a regatta on, and I held up the whole regatta by 45 minutes because it took me so long to finish it. But we would have been doing that type of thing. Our father would have had us out in the weir out by the county hall and put you in there for 20 minutes to swim against the weir and see how long you could keep going. And when you eventually got tired, you know, you went backwards, and that was kind of the type of thing that we were doing. So I had been doing that, and then I suppose school, going out, nightclubs, and all of that, and swimming took a back step for a number of years. But at all times would have been dipping in and out of the sea. When I moved to Crosshaven in 2002, and I was swimming with you reasonably regularly at that stage, Ned, you were a friend of mine at that stage. There wasn't a basis for sea swimming in Myrtleville at the time. And you used to come down an odd time, and I used to go west an odd time to meet you. And you would have been an advocate to me to see what we could get going in Myrtleville at that stage. So started in 2002, and there was myself and Sean O'Halpine used to come down for a while, and a number of others used to flit in and flit out. But it was small stuff. I mean, the Dutchman would have been seen in those days as a big swim to go out and to go back. And it was only really a number. So we were doing that, and we were doing it regularly, like a number of times a week. But small crews, small numbers. And it was really only when Damien got involved in it that he put this type of the structure on it, and we expanded it to the masses. And he can tell you about how he went about that.
You can talk now, Damien.
Yeah, I can talk. Yeah, so my background in swimming was non-existent. I was a rower, I spent a lot of time jumping in and out of waves in the water, always being very comfortable in it. And after a spin, sometimes we'd go for a swim out in the lake. But I actually couldn't swim. I could breaststroke a little bit, but I never swam properly. And I always said that if there was ever a triathlon in Monkstown, that I would, I'm living near Monkstown, that I'd enter the triathlon. So I entered the swim leg of a triathlon in 2011, came second last. That's important, though. There was someone behind me. Took me, I think, about 32 minutes to swim 500 meters, but I got there. And much to the surprise of my family, got out of the water beaming and said, I have found what I want to do, because I'd given up training after rowing and I was just big and done fit. I got some very good advice from a brother-in-law of mine who told me that the best person to teach me how to swim was Eilish Burns. Little knowing at the time that he was giving me pure gold by telling me this. So I, like an idiot, rang Eilish Burns and said, hello, my name's Damien, I'd like to learn how to swim. Who? What? And she sure enough, she said she would teach me how to swim, and she gave me the time of my first lesson 7 months later. So she told me afterwards that she was quite certain she'd never hear from me again. But 7 months later, on the morning, I turned up on to stand on the deck up in Silver Springs, and Eilish taught me how to swim. So that was, I don't know, maybe 2010 or 11, something like that. And she asked me what I wanted to do, and I said, oh yeah, I want to swim around Garnish Island. That's what I'm preparing for. That'll be about 3 kilometres. Oh, you'll have to get a boat for that. I said, no, I think there's actually an organised swim, Eilish. I'll be okay. Well, you'll have to practice in the sea. Like, Eilish, you'll have to practice in the sea as you need to do. It's a 3 kilometre swim, so you want to be doing about 20k in the sea to be prepared for that kind of swim. I said, okay, I'll find somewhere to go. And I went looking online, and I found a little one-liner, which I think you had some part in getting them to put up there, Ned, which said, swimming in Myrtleville Monday night, contact Bernard Lynch and a mobile number. And I don't know what site it was on. That was it. That was the level of information. So I rang Bernard, and ever the entrepreneur, he told me, oh yes, loads of people swimming, great swim last night. Yeah, you can come down next week. I think Bernard had been in for 2 minutes the night before and was freezing, and he was there on his own. I turned up the following Monday, which was sometime early in 2012, and went for a swim. We swam to the famous Dutchman, which is about a 1,500 meter round swim. That's why when Bernard was saying earlier that
I'll give you 1,000 out and back.
The Dutchman, yeah, Ned isn't very good on his distances or using Google Maps or anything like that. So about 1,500 out and back. Either way, whether it was 1,000 or 1,500, it was like a marathon to us at the time. So I loved it, and I said, can we swim again tomorrow? And Bernard wasn't available, and I decided I'd go down myself another day. And my wife was a bit concerned about me swimming on my own, and she, in her own inimitable style, said to me, "Look, you found one Egypt swimming down there."
You froze, Damien. You froze, Damien. Bernard, you're moving again. That's good.
I've been hoping someone was going to do this.
Damien, you need to go back there too. You found one person and your wife in her own imitable style. That was the last comment you had, and we lost you then.
Did you lose me completely? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry about that. So my wife told me that I had found one Egypt to swim with, and there must be other Egypts down there who were looking to go swimming as well, or are they around? And could I find them? So I asked Bernard if he'd be okay with me putting up a website called Myrtleville Swimmers. And he said, yeah, I thought that was a great idea. What will we put on it? And I said, well, we just put up swim times, nothing else. Don't want to get involved in putting up any other stuff. So we'll just put up the times that we're swimming, and hopefully some people will turn up. So that's what we started to do, put up we'll be here swimming, and sent it out to anyone that we could think of. And it started to work very quickly. We had people turning up. Is this still working?
Yeah.
Yeah. We had people turning up. It was, I remember James Slowey, who was a fantastic triathlete and an extreme athlete, during ultra marathons and various things, came along to come swimming with us. And James was as lean as a whippet, so he used to wear a wetsuit to try and stay warm. And even at that, he was only barely hanging on in the cold water. But he just kept going. Ended up swimming in the Nordic fords and various different things. Extraordinary athlete. There was Rebecca Power, who was living in Thurles, used to drive down and come swimming with us at 6:30 in the morning in Cork. You get a message saying, "I'm in the tunnel. I'll be there shortly." We'd have to come back and get her. So she, lots of other different people started coming around at the time. There were lots of people in Crosshaven who had been swimming sort of informally themselves and were quite happy to coalesce around a time on a Monday evening and to look at other times that they could come down and start to form a group. So the idea was that it would be not a club, that we would have a group of like-minded people who wanted to swim safely and were willing to meet up at the right times and to swim with other people and just generally look out for each other. I suppose, we should mention, and Bernard hasn't mentioned it, around 2010, he started a swim from Myrtleville to Church Bay in aid of the RNLI. I think in the first year it didn't actually work because the weather wasn't right and they moved it from Myrtleville to Church Bay. But by the second year it did work. And from then on, from having 30 or 40 people attending, this year I think we had 430 entries. So that'll kind of tell you the scale of the way that the swimming has gone. But the RNLI, Myrtleville to Church Bay swim that Myrtleville swimmers run and raise funds for the RNLI, has been a huge part of that. It gave a bit of an identity and a focus for a lot of people. It's 2 kilometers, so it is possible for non-marathon swimmers to take part in, but it also still requires quite a bit of training and focus and thought. So it's been a very useful way of getting people involved as well. Have I gone off the point there?
It reminded me of a couple of things. So, and I had forgotten completely about them. So the small mention of Bernard probably happened because I put together a list years ago of contacts at various places around for open water swimming. So if you want to go to Lochide, call this person. You want to go to Myrtleville, call this person. You want to go to Sandy Cove, call this person. And it was just kind of a map of Cork. At one point, it was a map of Ireland going, here's a bunch of contacts, get yourself started. I think the second thing, which for anybody who wants to start something, is when you have, as you described, Bernard, is one agent that commits to a date and a time and says, we're going to meet at 6 o'clock on a Monday evening. Now you've got a focus, and a lot of people are much more comfortable coming down when there's somebody else there, yep, who possibly has hot tea and biscuits. Yep. And I smile when I say it, but it makes all the difference in the world for somebody to come down. And you're talking about Rebecca from Thurles, comes all the way down from Thurles, which is a good couple hours drive, and rolls in, and people go, "Hi, Rebecca." Is much different than showing up with somebody walking their dog who looks at you a little bit suspiciously, and you have to worry about they're going to steal your clothes. So that whole thing of setting a time and whatever. Bernard, I wanted to circle back to one other thing. You ended up doing this 12K swim in 2008, and you were the first Myrtleville person in forever, maybe, to aspire for a longer distance. How did you get there? How did it happen? Did Eilish kick you? Did I invite you? Because I don't remember.
No. I mean, I've known Eilish, and she's a great friend of mine. I meet Eilish regularly, but I've known her for 50 years. We used to swim together as kids, but Eilish wasn't in that sea swimming circle with me at that stage. It would have been you, Ned. I mean, you were like I've been doing a lot in the sea with different. I was diving with the Irish Army. We would have been down in Sandy Cove doing circles at Sandy Cove when I was 21 with the Army with fins and that type of thing. I've been in the sea swimming side of things, and would have been comfortable enough swimming reasonable distances. Met with yourself, and you had this, or somebody. It wasn't you. I can try to think of the man who had the swim organised. Might be Mike Harris said.
Fergus Galvin after
Fergus Galvin. Fergus Galvin was the name, and he had come to Myrtleville, and he had said it to me, and I went down and did it and enjoyed it immensely. Actually, I think the first one was Black Rock to Cove. The next one was the City Hall to Cove, was it, or the Clarion to Cove?
Yeah.
Maybe. But the structure came, I suppose, quite naturally in Myrtleville. Damien set up the website. We advertised the times we were swimming, and all of a sudden, people came, and more people came. And then little pods. Damien and me had our own swim group, and there was maybe 10 or 12 in that, or 8 or 10, and it would have been Carol Cashels and Eddie Irwins and all of Liam Mars, and all of those would have started coming and joining in over the years. But then lots of other groups, nurses who were finishing night shift had a 9 o'clock shift in the morning when they'd come down there. Fire brigade people who were working through the night might have done a 9 o'clock. People who dropped off their kids to school were meeting at certain times. And then over the years, there became groups and pods. And my own wife never swam in the sea for 18, 19 years. She's her group and is down in Myrtleville nearly more than I am at this stage. My sisters are down there, friends of hers are down there, and an awful lot of people and all ages, slightly different, Ned, than Sandy Cove in that regard, in that you would have the young, which you have in there, you have the swimmers, you have the competitive, we'll say, swimmers, the marathon swimmers, but you have an awful lot of paddlers too, and people who are swimming 200 meters and 400 meters and 600 meters and getting every bit as much enjoyment out of us as any one of us are. So that's kind of the background to it.
Just we do have the same thing at Sandy Cove. You just don't see them, Bernard, because they don't come at the same times as us. But it literally at 9:30 in the morning, there's a group of 10 women that come down, and they swim over to the island, have a big old chat, and swim back.
Okay.
And have just the greatest time of their lives. I'm on a kind of nodding basis with them, but I'm not swimming with them. Damien and Bernard, tell us about some of the crazier social things that you folks ended up with. I remember you had the vampire swims, and you had those parties at Bunny Cannellans, and you had that horrific yellow towel. You ended up with more gear than anybody could possibly imagine could be produced in Gunners, wherever you produced it, from hoodies to shirts to booties to swimsuits to Gunners, whatever else.
Yeah, and every year.
Well, I still think that maybe I'll hand that one over to Damien. The one I mentioned as we start, one of the first things that we did was we decided I'll hand that one over to Damien, but I'll just one of the first things that we decided to do in the early days when Damien joined would have been come up with a brand. What were we? And we looked at a logo. So we ran a competition for a logo for Myrtleville Swimmers, and we got we got 3 entries into it, or 4 entries, and Damien's wife was one of the entries, and then we had somebody else from Crosshaven and somebody else, and one was a kind of a hand drawn picture of Roach's Point, one was a hand drawn picture of the Dutchman, and one was graffiti on a wall from a Polish punk band that played there in 1970 something. And I presume, Damien, you were the Polish punk band. And what we did was we took the 3 logos, put them together, and developed the brand. And that's where the towel and the hats, and it's a beautiful brand, absolutely beautiful. And it's the one thing that Damien and me are still precious about today. There's absolutely no change to that brand. People use it on clothing and but that's what the brand is. I mean, there was hundreds of events and hundreds of different social kind of things, from vampire swims and nurses. Damien might remember them all. But the last thing I'll say just on that, the other thing that I think, and one of the reasons, Ned, and it's an interesting concept why Myrtleville developed and has the culture that it has, which is really good, is that we made a very early decision not to have a club down there. I think Damien alluded to a while ago, but there's no bosses, there's no committees, it's a group of like-minded people, as Damien said, and the person who's down there swimming 50 meters is as important as the person who's swimming 50 kilometers, and I think that stood us well, Damien, over the years.
Yeah, it has. And it's funny that you mentioned people swimming short distances and the older people. And I think it would be remiss of us not to mention Tom Birmingham and Pat Higgins, who swam every day there for I don't know how many years. And I think it was probably my second swim down there with Bernard that we got out of the water and he said to me, "Oh, hang on, you have to meet these two men," and brought me across the beach. And here were these two elderly gentlemen getting ready to make their way down the beach and to go swimming. Tom isn't with us any longer, God rest him, but they were just extraordinary people. And like Tom was, I don't know, nearly 80, and he kept saying to me, I'm fairly sure I could make it to Church Bay if you just told me the training, 2 kilometers an hour swim away. You know, he was an extraordinary man. He was a fantastic athlete, and it's that sort of an ethos of inclusion and enjoying what you're doing has been very important for us, for all of the people who were there. I did mention earlier that the idea behind the MyrtlevilleSwimmers.com blog or website was to just put up swim times. And I very clearly said, under no circumstances will I do anything else with it. Then I forgot that. And I started to do some funny, some just plain strange things with the website. One of them, as you're well aware, Ned, is I created a feud between, well, Bernard created the feud between Sandy Cove and Myrtleville. And I then took it on board. And all I can say is that the people who are on the website are not real people. They are our alter egos. Whether that's just as simple as the fact that Bernard is always called Bernie on the website and no one in the world calls him Bernie. And my name is never even mentioned on it. And so for those not in the know, we've pretty much declared open warfare on Sandy Cove at various times during the last 10 or 12 years, with some hilarious results. I mean, you know, we've had some great responses for different things that we've proposed for Sandy Cove, like shutting it down. And I would be driving past there if I was going down to West Cork to work, and I'd drive down and make sure there was nobody there, take a picture and post it online to say that, well, since there's nobody using this place, there's no point in having it here, and we should get rid of it. You know, we've had some very funny times with that. The funniest part of it for me is that there are people who think I'm serious and who are absolutely convinced that I hate everyone in Sandy Cove. And really, it's just me. The others are all fine.
I think
just to add to that, just to add to that, Damien, and to leave you. But you know, there was a lot of things, Ned. But we in Myrtleville were ahead of the posse. I mean, we were the first to develop recognition hats for distance swimming in Myrtleville. I mean, and you've obviously done a very good job down there, Ned, too, with your own distances. and I think you get one for 1 kilometer, 2 kilometer, and 3 kilometer, or something like that, or laps, is it, in Sandy Cove? But what was the hat we had, Damien, that we designed?
We had a few different levels. We had the LOL, the loads of laps hat. We had the Rothwell hat, which was ROFL, rate the second laps. You know, there's with a number of different important ones that I think Ned kind of wasn't able to deal with the acronyms. He went for numbers. I saw some 1 and 0 zeros and 0 0 1s or 2s on their hats, but our hats would be sort of differently focused. And also, we'd be very clear in stating that you can just draw your own hat in Myrtleville with whatever you think that you're after doing. If it's worthwhile, put it on your hat, and we will celebrate you for it. You know, Ned does much the same, I know, with his own.
So it's worth saying that that Sandy Cove and Myrtleville are kind of, it's in some places would be considered rival beaches, although we don't really have a beach at Sandy Cove where the water comes in. And between the three of us, I think it's fair to say we've gone out of our way to make sure that the rivalry has always been very good-natured. People are very welcome to swim one place or the other place. There's never any hassle, although I do put my sunglasses on if one of those yellow Myrtleville towels appears in the sunshine. And so it's always been very, very good that way. The other thing I would congratulate Myrtleville for, we had in the very early days of Sandy Cove some skins versus wetsuit nonsense. And I think for Myrtleville, you never had that. Everybody was welcome. Everything was inclusive. It didn't matter whether you were 85 years old coming down with mismatched booties and your wife's wetsuit. You were just as welcome as the speedster that came down and was in for 6 hours. So I think you've got a lot to be happy for in that. You two guys ended up with a really epic swim, which I never understood because you wanted to start at Sandy Cove and swim towards Myrtleville. And it's just like psychologically, it would have been easier to swim towards the Garden of Eden as a Sandy Cove than away from it. But tell us how you got that in your crazy heads, and tell us about the first year, which was actually more interesting than the second.
Well, Damien, you maybe give how we came to doing this, and then I'll talk about the swim on the day.
Yeah, sure. Again, this was, I've been swimming with Bernard for a while, as in weeks, like 4 to 6 weeks, something like that. And we're standing on the beach in Myrtleville one day, and he said, you know, I'd say you could probably swim from Sandy Cove to here. And I said, could you? Is that how far is that? He said, well, I don't know, but you know, it's a fair old distance. But I'd say you could do it. And I said, well, you could probably do it. But you see, I suppose, as I mentioned earlier, I came from a rowing background, so ridiculous training didn't hold any fear for me. But I wasn't willing to do it in a completely structured way. So something like, oh, we're going to swim from Kinsale back up to Myrtleville, I found that very enticing. So we started to say, well, we'll do a few other swims and see how we get on with them. So Bernard got a kayaker to come out with us, and we did, I think, a 3-hour swim one day, which took us from Crosshaven to Fountainstone, back towards Church Bay and back in again, something like that. And the kayaker in the middle of it, with waves breaking over our heads because it was rough, said, what are you doing this for? And we said, well, we're doing it to do this. This is the point of what we're doing. We're doing it to go swimming in the sea. He said, fair enough, and paddled off and stayed with us. But after that swim, Bernard said, well, you know, what about the Sandy Cove to Myrtleville? And I said, well, we've done 3 hours. We did an hour or two last week. Next week, we'll do 4 hours. The week after that, we'll do 5 hours. The week after that, we'll do 6 hours. And then we'll go down to Sandy Cove and swim back. That's about as structured as it was. And sometime in August 2012, I suppose, something like that, we camped to Sandy Cove, where I have never swam a lap, as it happened. Got there and realized this is a terrible mistake. How do we get back from here? And started swimming back towards Myrtleville. So Bernard can tell you what happened.
Yeah, my memory of that swim was of the year now, I can't remember, but Finbar and Rob came down to say hello to us as we were going, which I thought was very nice of them. And I think
They just came to make sure you left, Bernard.
That's right. we had Tom McCarthy with us on a boat, and we had, I think, my brothers with us on 2 boats. We did a passage plan, for want of a better word. I think I left, or Damien might have left 45 minutes before me or 40 minutes before me, and that was based on swim pace. And off we went, and it was cold. Water temperature was that weekend was 13.5 degrees. I think, Damien, am I right in that?
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah.
13.5 degrees.
It didn't go over 14 anyway.
And we left and off we went, and I got very cold somewhere around Noville, not too far into the swim, 11 kilometers in, might have done another 1 or 2, maybe Noville was 12 kilometers at the time, and I called it a day. It wasn't working for me. And Damien, who had been swimming a very short period of time, landed in Myrtleville 7 hours later or 6 hours later. And I can't remember. What was your swim time, Damien? Do you remember?
It was just under 7 hours, but that was the first year, and that was in a wetsuit. So yeah,
but for a guy who had never swam in his history in terms of sport to any large extent, it was a phenomenal achievement, and I was delighted for him. Came out next day, said, well, you know, you can either suck it up and just forget about it, or you live to fight another day. We lived to fight another day. And within a day, Damien and me had made a plan that we would do it again the following year with tugs for both of us. So that's how that came about.
Yep, it's good. And it became a little bit of a focus for other people down in Myrtleville as well. They were kind of aware that we were training and more people were joining in. So if we were doing a 6K swim in training, people would turn up and do half it or all of it, and just lots of different people involved, you know. It was great.
And then we went through a massive learning curve then at this. I mean, we were drinking, you know, some powder that we got off somebody the day before, and it was high five. And that swim. Anna or sorry, can you hear me?
Sorry,
Yep.
Bernard. I don't want anybody to get the wrong impression. There's some powder you didn't get from the guy behind the donut shop. This is some powder you got from a reputable retailer.
Well, yeah, I think I can't remember who gave it to me, but it was high five, and I remember I found it very sickening. And you know, when we think of what we know today in terms of food and nutrition and training and using, and when we go and we do marathon swims now, we know it and we know exactly what we're about. This was all stuff, you know, off the seat of our pants. And the following year, we did a substantial amount of more training and got the feeds and got the nutrition right. Same plan for me and Damien. Water temperature was a bit colder that year, but we did it and we both finished it successfully. So that was a great event. And Damien did it in his togs that year. Again, fantastic.
So this is now 2013. Myrtleville is in full flow. You've got the crowds coming in. You've got the nurses delighting everybody. You've got the vampire swims. You've got the church-based swims. All of that sort of groundswell is working really, really well. You now put a couple of stakes in the ground for marathon swimming. And the next milestone for me is 2015, Trevor Malone completes the English Channel. And I remember I was, you know, the 0.001% of Trevor's crew. I remember coming up and doing a 6-hour swim with him. I think I had hours 4 to 5 or something like that. And Carol had 5 to 6. And we did a handoff and she took off. And Bernard, you followed up the English Channel the next year.
Yeah.
And now Myrtleville is a relative hotbed of marathon swimming. Why don't you rattle off a couple of the names that come to mind, just to put some pressure on you? You'll forget somebody and they'll murder you, which is good. I'll look forward to that.
Okay, well, first and foremost, I'd have to say, in terms of names in open water swimming, and for the person that she was a big help to us on the Sandy Cove swim. And anything you ever ask her, she's generally right on. And she splits her time. I wouldn't say evenly, but she swims in Sandy Cove quite a bit. But for the main part, she swims in Myrtleville. That's Carol Cashel. And I don't need to go through the swims that Carol has done. People know what they are, but she's done as much open water swimming as any other person or most of the people in Ireland. So Carl would be huge. Trevor Malone, obviously, an incredible swimmer. His ability in the water, the effortless way that he swims and he glides and the speeds that he goes along. And he was the first Myrtlevillian to swim the English Channel. But that's not necessarily true either, because Eddie Irwin, who is a Myrtleville swimmer, but when he swam the English Channel was probably swimming in Sandy Cove. But Eddie is was the first triple crowner in Ireland, and he's swimming regularly in Myrtleville with his wife and his kids. Neddy Irwin, another great open water swimmer. It's a young man, and Neddy's probably 23, 22, 21 now, I suppose. Lots and lots of other people. We've got the Myrtleville Mermaids who did relays across the English Channel. We'd Owen Lowry was in another team that did swims across the English Channel. We've had people that have swam from Feenagh to Tralee. We've people that have swam. We've swam every single point in Myrtleville from Capel Island all the way. Where are we down to now? God Almighty, well, if we did our swim from the Skelligs to the Fastnet this year, Ned, we would have had the whole way done to the Blasket Islands. So that's not bad going. And we will complete that swim this year. And you'll be part and parcel of that. So between a lot of people in Myrtleville, there's a lot of distances covered. I'm sure I've left out lots of names there, but Liam Mard.
Maeve Mulcahy, of course, for the Fastnet swim. Maeve was there before I was swimming there, I'd say she would have been down with you. She's a great swimmer and a great stalwart down there. And
Liam Maher, except he got towed. We did a swim one day, Ned, from Myrtleville to Ballycotton, which was a 24K swim, I think. Now, there was myself, Liam, Eddie Irwin, and Carol did it. But like, we think Liam got a tow for a good bit of the way on the way down. But Damien has more information on that. Like, I'm not too sure.
Does Liam swim or just provide shade?
Liam is a big man. He is, and a great character.
So I think one of the things that you guys should be proud of is that for swimmers at Myrtleville now, you can be the dipper, you could be the person that does a bit of a paddle. You now have got those buoys installed, so you've got a kind of an artificial island created without any goats. Yeah. You've got something of an island that appears from time to time. But for the people who want to do more than that, you've got all these role models, not necessarily role models, but all these people. And somebody says, well, I kind of fancy a longer swim. And they're down at the beach and they go, well, Maeve did this and Liam did this and Eddie did this and Bernard did this and Damon did this. And they have friends that they can talk to. They can slowly get inspired. Your group travels a lot to whether they're awards events or swims around the country. I remember a whole bunch of Myrtlevillians ended up at Galway one year for that Galway marathon across the way. So I think you've created an environment where people can just figure out what they want to do. And they've got a very supportive cast around them that'll help them and advise them and crew for them and God knows whatever else.
Yeah, and there's some fantastic people down there, and it's true to say that if you have an event and there's always going to be someone from Myrtleville there at this stage, but sometimes there's 40 or 50 of them turn up. They're extraordinary. And the vampire swim has been mentioned a couple of times there. I think it's worth just mentioning that. I think it was Mary Watson and Aisling Barry who put that in place. And at one point, it was the largest vampire swim in the world. They had these swims in the States where there was 15 and 20 people at it. Or one year they had 30, I think 92 people or something turned up for one of the vampire swims, all dressed up, all wearing the makeup, all really into it, raising funds for blood donations for really important requirements. And, people like that doing things like that are just great to see. When you start something off, just putting something up on a website for a couple of times, to see it go on to become a community, and it is a community. It's very heartening to see that. You should mention as well that, well, some people don't want their picture taken anymore, i.e. Lee and a few more. Ron Russell has taken about 2.5 billion photographs down there and put them up everywhere for people to see. And that has created a huge buzz around it as well, for people who want to come and see what's happening in Myrtleville. If you look it up online, you see smiling faces, enjoying themselves. You see all shapes, sizes, ages, just open and accessible. And that is one of the advantages in Myrtleville as well, jokes aside. The fact that weather permitting, you can swim on any tide is a huge, huge advantage. If you I was about to say, as long as it's bright, you can swim. But we've done a lot of night swims over the years, and there are groups. Marcus Austin has a group who go down and swims most mornings. They swim in the dark of it. They're always there. So if they needed to go in, they have their lights. They're very careful. They're very experienced. But, you can get into the sea in Myrtleville and enjoy it. And it's just, I suppose you could say it's a shame that for so many years people weren't taking advantage of Cork Harbour. But with the changes that have been made, with the pollution being reduced so hugely over the last couple of years, it's just a fantastic place to swim now. Just thinking there of Ger Venner and Gary Frost and a couple of more people, they did some swims around the harbour, just came up with a distance to swim in from Myrtleville, swim over towards Coskinny, do all of that safely, really just enjoying what we have on our own doorstep. And that's fantastic to see. You mentioned the boys. It would be remiss of me not to say that the boys came about because of Sheila and Loughlin Lappers sitting in a meeting where a group of people were talking about where could we use some funds that we have from the HSE to assist in healthy living in Ireland. And she said, well, actually, I think I know some people who might be able to use money like that. So I got a phone call saying, would you do something down in Myrtleville? Would you put in the boys? I think the boys have created far more of a buzz and an interest than we could ever have imagined. Because it's like you said, Nick, it's one thing to go somewhere and know that you're going to be welcomed and be able to meet people. It's another thing again to be welcomed, meet people, and then be told it's 200 meters to that boy out there. If you want to go another 200 beyond that, it's that one. Don't forget that means it's 400 coming back. It just makes it so safe and accessible and open to people, and it has worked really, really well. And it's, you know, it was through a connection where one of a group of 4 or 5 of the Lochline Lappers came up and swam in the Myrtleville the Church Bay swim one year again, something that Bernard started just as a small event, and it led to us getting the boys, and that has been a huge bonus for us down there.
You'll find that all over the world, that where there's a natural course, a set of buoys laid out, or a lot of the beaches in America, it's sort of rock berm to rock berm, or these jetties that come out.
Yeah.
You know, what did you do? Oh, I did 3 jetties today. And it gives people something to measure their distance by. People are religiously recording the time, although it doesn't matter because the tide, you know, will mess your times up. But anytime there's a natural course, it can encourage people who want to keep track, or who want to challenge, or want to build or something.
2 other things just to mention there. First of all, in terms of swimmers, you said I might leave some. Obviously, Jim Shalhoub is one of the top open water swimmers in Munster and Ireland. You've got Frank Hallisey down there swimming and doing some fantastic feats and different side of things. But one of the reasons too why we've been so lucky with the success in Myrtleville, Damien, and particularly with, you know, fundraisers that we would do for boys, or the Myrtleville Church Bay swim that we do in aid of the RNLI, the success of that is because of the community that we live in. The neighbours in Myrtleville, number one, are really, really supportive of what we do. We're seen as an additive, a positive additive to the community down there. But also, Ned, you know, we have our swim there every year. I remember doing a swim up around Helvig Head one day, and about 11 of us headed around in weather not too good. And there was one kind of an old clinker with an outboard with us, and that broke down halfway, but we kept on swimming and got it done. And, you know, we go down to our swim, and we've got the Coast Guard regional head offices based in Myrtleville Crosshaven, with the RNLI based in Myrtleville Crosshaven, the civil defence based there. We've got a great guard of support down there, and we could have, for our swim net, we could have, you know, RNLI, civil defence, we'd have Coast Guard, we'd have 35 ribs out there, we'd have 30, 40 paddle boarders. Funky Town are just part and parcel of our community as well in Fountainstown there. The flag officer, the top officer in the naval fleet, very often brings the flagship Navy boat to the event, and that covers us as well. And that makes a lot of what we do in the community. First of all, it creates visibility, and it creates maybe a bit of noise, but it makes it very much something people are positive about, and it makes it something that is very easy to do with that type of support. So that helps as well.
It's also interesting, Bernard, as I talked to Stephen Black, one of the early Cork organizing pioneers. In 2002, for example, there were a number of 1 and 2 kilometer swims. You know, Shirkin Island, we'd go down to Clonakilty, we'd go up to the Blackwater, and there was a group of 20, 30 people who were competent and interested, and we kind of trusted to do these swims. If you had organized a Church Bay swim, the 2K swim in 2002, you might have gotten 30 people to do it safely. Maybe. And I think part of the testament to what you and others have accomplished over the years is, now when you do the swim, not only are you fielding 150 locals or 200 locals or whatever it is, but you've got people from all over the country coming down, because they've heard about the reputation, they've gotten good reports about the swim. They're looking forward to having that burger afterwards. The awards have always been a good social buzz about them, and so that whole ethos of let's get people in the water and let's build them up, you're actually creating a whole group of very competent swimmers who kind of, most importantly, know what they're competent for. because those swims, all the boats in the world, if you put a bunch of swimmers in, they can't do the swim. They don't help. So you've managed to get and create this group of swimmers that can really do the business now.
True.
So listen, guys, I want to thank you very much. Your contributions to the open water swimming scene in Cork, Ireland, and God help us further afield have been really, really successful. You've turned out very enthusiastic, positive people that everybody's delighted to welcome to their events. So thank you very much, guys.
Thanks,
Ned. See you in the pool in the morning.
Yeah, you will.
I'm quite sure there are people we should have mentioned in this as well, but
Oh, they'll murder you. I was looking forward to that. Talk to you later.